MacBook Air with the M4 chip is a huge deal, or is gonna be a huge deal, but let's be real, it's in the Apple bunker secret lab, you know, in California or elsewhere, who knows. It's about to be mass produced. We're probably gonna see it in the next 5 months, and I don't think it's getting a redesign, so we can kind of have a feel for it. I mean, there might be some other tweaks like nanotexture and whatever, but we know how the M4 chip performs, you know, because we've been talking about the M4 MacBook Pros, but don't forget about the MacBook Air, because for most, and even for me in a lot of cases, it's the ideal laptop for its form factor, and you know, the whole rest of the shtick, which I'm gonna get to. So yeah, in this video, I wanna talk about why you may wanna hold off for an updated MacBook Air, because I think beyond the redesign that it got in 2022, this is gonna be the best MacBook Air that we have had in a long time. First up though, I wanna tell you, or rather probably remind you, what makes the MacBook Air such a great Apple Silicon laptop, or laptop in general, beyond its lower cost compared to the MacBook Pro. And that is, of course, its really stellar, beautiful form factor. It's in the name. That was the whole point of the MacBook Air line, to be slimmer and trimmer. You know, it was a great notebook. Now it's a proper laptop. And it's my go-to laptop, even though I have a 16-inch MacBook Pro and have access to a 14-inch MacBook Pro for testing. This is my job, of course. So I get to use all these laptops, and this is my preferred form factor for work on the go. If I'm working on at a diner or a restaurant, or, you know, at my parents' house or a friend's house, or if I'm going on a trip, I prefer to take this over something clunkier and heavier. It's less of a liability. I can throw it in a bag. You know, I can sit it on my lap. This is the best, you know, laptop form factor from Apple, hands down. If the MacBook Pro could be like this, I'm sure it would be, and I would buy that over something bigger and clunkier, because it's just such a pleasure to use. Another aspect that's great about the MacBook Air line is the 15-inch model. The 13-inch model is great. You know, it started out with that in 2022, and in general, that was the bigger size, or sort of the standard size for so many years. But then Apple brought along the 15-inch form factor, which is a great sweet spot in between 14 inches and 16 inches with the MacBook Pro. You know, the 14-inch feels a little too small, the 16-inch is just gargantuan, and meanwhile, the MacBook Air 15-inch is wonderful for productivity, you know, specifically split-screen multitasking, which I do quite a bit of, and also just using apps where you want to have a lot of space for your UI. You know, you want to see what you're doing, like in Lightroom here, or Final Cut, or whatever you're doing. This display size, again, is just phenomenal, and the best part is it's in such a wonderful, sleek form factor. Once again, not a big, clunky, heavy MacBook Pro, which has its benefits, but again, the MacBook Air here is just so nice and light, hence the Air name or nomenclature. And then the best part is, you know, in general, this is an update that we got without it even being an update technically. It now has 16 gigabytes across the board. Even the M2 13-inch that they're still selling, because they sell last gen ones still, like the iPhones, that has 16 gigs of RAM to start out at, like $899. Although it's definitely discounted on other websites, so please do your research. Now that you don't have to desperately upgrade to 16 from 8, you can take that upgrade money, if you have it, and put it towards a higher storage configuration. So 512 minimum, I would say, is your safe bet here, or a terabyte if you really want to special order that, which I also really recommend here. So now that your experience is pretty decent as is, if not great, I would argue, yeah, you can put that money towards bigger and better things like storage. So let's all say hip hip hooray for that, because you're no longer bottlenecking your powerful M2, M3, and then upcoming M4 chip. So yeah, that's an update again that just sort of came out of nowhere without them even having to refresh the lineup yet. Of course, they're going to, and we would have gotten that spec bump if they didn't decide to do it already, but I'm definitely glad that they did. So, you know, this laptop is still worth looking at. I would say if the 8GB models were still around, I'd be more hesitant, but the fact that Apple decided to bump things up just for the sake of AI, or, you know, God knows what, maybe we were complaining loud enough, yeah, this makes this laptop very, very relevant and worthwhile, even if you decide to go with one now, or an M2 one, for example. But before we continue with the video here, I have a brief message from the people over at Opera and their One R2 next generation browser. It improves upon so many of your more typical lackluster browser experiences, firstly with its clean design and super cool animated themes and lots of customization to match your unique vibe or needs. R2 also has this great media player that lives in the left sidebar of the browser, letting you easily toggle music playing off Spotify and more without ever having to leave the app. The sidebar also houses super sleek web experiences for Instagram, TikTok, X, and more, which again keeps you in browser and gets you back into the surfing or productivity action in no time at all. Another amazing feature here is pop-out floating windows with the player and for streaming videos off YouTube, for example, with no additional player app required for this, which is just so convenient. You can also interact with and view 2 tabs within one window, which I really love because I'm doing this all the time, and having everything in one window makes the whole experience less clunky, far easier to move around or minimize. And for when you're really in the trenches, tabs automatically group together into islands, which are contextual, making it easier to stay on track with your browsing. And if you have 50 to 30 tabs open at a time, the browser will leave these colored pills or traces on your most recently used tabs so you don't get totally lost in the browsing sauce. Last up though, Opera One R2 has its own sweet take on AI. Their integrated area command line is easily toggled with its button in the sidebar or by simply pressing Command and / without leaving the browser or your current web page. You can ask it anything to succinctly answer, search on the web and or from the given context of your open web page. You can also continue your chat with Area in a more app-like interface and ask it to recognize and answer questions about images you upload, along with generate images from scratch with a simple prompt as well. All in all, the Opera One R2 browser is on a whole new level of advance compared to the more typical go-to browser culprits. It's also with the times as well with regard to a sleek interface and AI integration, which are genuinely so sick and helpful. I think it's a perfect complement to the newer MacBook Air and Pro models as well. R2 is free to use, and I'll leave a link below if you're interested in checking it out and giving it a try. But anyway, enough yapping about the MacBook Air as it is, although it's really great right now. It's only going to get better with the M4 chip, but how, you might be thinking? Besides it, being a newer chip and more powerful, which is, a basic, almost rhetorical question or answer, well, the M4 series of chips is the biggest deal, I would say, since M1. M1, made Apple Silicon a thing. We got all the performance gains and the power efficiency and all that. It blew everybody out of the water, but there was nothing to compare it to. And then M2 came out and M3 came out and sort of iterated on that, better CPU, better GPU. But M4 is like the first generation since that sort of wows us compared to the M1 series of chips, because they're sort of bringing higher tier performance down. So what I'm saying is the M4 chip is acting a lot like the M3 Pro chip in the previous higher end or middle tier MacBook Pros, which is a big deal because now you can get that level of performance in here at this price with this form factor without having to, carry something clunkier around and pay more for it. And I would say tasks or productivity or creative tasks or whatever, they're evolving more slowly than the chips, if you know what I'm saying. So if you're doing a lot of 4K video editing or photo editing or maybe even some rendering or whatever, that's gotten a little more advanced, but these chips have gotten advanced way more quickly. So we get, again, proper MacBook Pro level performance in here, which is nuts, and yes, you give up a port or two and you don't have MagSafe and all that, but honestly, there are a lot of instances where I want this form factor and I don't want this laptop to be a total liability. I'm not totally advocating for, 2 laptop ownership, but if you're a freak like me and you have a work laptop and you have a more casual laptop, the fact that your more casual laptop here is a lot like your work laptop is just mind-blowing here. So I'm really happy about that, and this makes sense because M1 through M3 had 8-core CPUs, M4 is going to have a 10-core CPU, there might be, I think, a 9-core CPU binned version in the MacBook Air, maybe a lower end one, but even still, it's going to be approaching, M3 Pro level performance, which is just nuts. Another benefit coming with M4 is the fact that it's based on brand new processor architecture, 3nm Gen 2 from TSMC, which is a lot more power efficient. And as you can imagine, this is a big deal for the MacBook Air, the thin and light, all day battery life laptop here, because, we're gonna be able to see, or hopefully squeeze more screen on time out of this laptop. I don't think it's getting any slimmer, I hope not, because it's pretty great right now, and I hope they don't make the battery smaller, hopefully a little bit bigger. If they do that, the efficiency with the chip is going to give us an additional 2 to hopefully 3 or 4 hours of screen on time, because that's what we got with the MacBook Pro M4 Pro, for example. That thing was sitting at, I think, 18 hours of battery life, which was not great considering how much more chunky it is and how much bigger of a battery it has. Now it gets 22 hours, so maybe we'll see 20 with this, maybe even 22, possibly 24. I doubt that, but still, this would be great. At least for the 15-inch model. Maybe the 13-inch model won't see the same gains, but the 15-inch model is my favorite anyway, so I don't really care about the 13-inch. But still, across the board, we should expect to see, hopefully better battery life here. And again, that makes sense because they're not making this any slimmer, they're not gonna make the battery any smaller, the chip is more efficient, so there you go. So better performance, M3 Pro level performance, and MacBook Pro level battery life here.
And on top of everything I've said so far, and specifically on top of the new 16GB of memory or RAM standard, the top configuration of memory or RAM you can get with this laptop is now 32GB, which is huge for people who want to make this their one and only machine, which they can now because not only is it, as powerful as a mid-tier last generation MacBook Pro, but now you can get double the RAM, which actually helps you with not just creative stuff, because creative stuff or more higher power stuff, more power hungry stuff, definitely takes advantage of that RAM, which is nice, but general productivity does too. macOS is designed to utilize as much RAM as possible to make your experience faster. So if you're like me and you have a billion tabs or apps open, Obsidian, Notion, Opera, whatever else, you can just have all this stuff open and scattered and have so many desktops and things, and you can just be whizzing without slowing your laptop down, which was definitely the case with even last generation 8GB model M3 and M2 MacBook Airs. So again, if this is gonna be your only machine, not only is it recently redesigned, and I say that because it took them like a decade to do that, not only can you get it in this elite creme de la creme, however you say that, form factor. It's the best form factor in a laptop ever, in my opinion. Not only do you get M3 Pro level performance, but you also get like this almost desktop level of memory that was, like standard in the M1 Mac Studio. I mean, that's a huge deal for power user MacBook Air users. This is like a slim MacBook Pro now, which makes me really, really excited. So yeah, the MacBook Air with the M4 chip is going to be a huge deal. And not only that, it's gonna make last generation models like this, which are already so fantastic, even cheaper first party or third party. So, wait until the MacBook Air is refreshed to get a new laptop. The MacBook Pros are nice, but they're definitely more niche. They have more prestige in the Pro name, but I'm telling you, the MacBook Air is just absolutely, mwah, it is, I totally, But anyway, the MacBook Air here, specifically the 15-inch model, is just such a fantastic product. One of Apple's best, and also in my top 5 or possibly even top 3 favorite Apple products of all time. It is a culmination of everything they do best, and it's no surprise that this is one of the best-selling laptops on the market right now. You really can't do better. So buy one now if you have to, preferably buy one later. It's only going to get better. And yeah, and even if you buy one now or you buy a last gen one later, it's gonna bring the cost down. So, it's a win-win either way. And that about wraps everything up here. I hope this video was helpful. Check out my link to Opera 1 or 2 down below if you haven't already. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.